The ambulance sirens screamed through the humid city streets, their wailing blending with the chaos of horns and shouts. Vanessa King gripped the steering wheel tightly, her heart pounding as she swerved to avoid an impatient driver cutting through traffic. The dispatch call had been urgent, a multi-car collision on the highway with critical injuries. Time was the enemy, as always. "Hang in there," Vanessa muttered under her breath, though the words were more for herself than for the patient waiting ahead. She glanced briefly in the rearview mirror at her partner, Tim, who was checking their equipment. When they arrived at the scene, the destruction was staggering. Twisted metal glinted under the streetlights, and the acrid smell of gasoline hung heavy in the air. Emergency responders were already scrambling to pull victims from the wreckage. "There," Tim shouted, pointing toward a black luxury car that had slammed into the concrete barrier. Vanessa's stomach tightened when she saw the driver. A man was slumped over the wheel, his pale face partially visible through the shattered glass. Vanessa wasted no time. "We need the stretcher now," she barked, grabbing her trauma bag and racing toward the car. As they worked to pry open the door, her mind raced. The driver's suit and the sleek interior screamed money. He was likely one of the city's elite. But none of that mattered. To Vanessa, every patient was the same. Lives didn't carry price tags. Finally, the door gave way. Blood streaked the man's forehead, and his shallow breaths hinted at broken ribs. "Sir, can you hear me?" Vanessa asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The man groaned faintly, his eyelids fluttering open. His piercing blue eyes met hers for a brief moment before he slipped into unconsciousness. Hours later, Vanessa leaned against the hospital corridor wall, exhaustion weighing heavily on her. She ran a hand over her curly hair, still damp from the sweat of the evening. The emergency room buzzed with activity, but her focus remained on the man she'd saved. A nurse approached, breaking her thoughts. "Vanessa, they're asking for you in room 204. He's awake." Vanessa blinked in surprise. "Already?" He was in bad shape. The nurse shrugged. "He's asking for you specifically." Puzzled, Vanessa made her way to the room. When she entered, the man she'd saved was sitting upright, his pale complexion contrasting sharply with the dark circles under his eyes. Despite his frail appearance, his gaze was sharp. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse but sincere. "They told me you're the reason I'm still alive." Vanessa waved him off. "Just doing my job, mister?" "Lucas Sterling," he said, offering a faint smile. "Though most people just call me Lucas." The name clicked. "Luck had nothing to do with it," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "You saved me." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "It's what I do. You don't need to thank me." Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to read between her words. "I mean it. If there's anything I can do, anything at all, just say the word." She shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. Just focus on getting better." Their conversation might have ended there, but Lucas pressed on. "You're not even curious why a billionaire was driving himself in the middle of the night?" Vanessa arched an eyebrow. "Not really. Everyone's life is messy in its own way." Lucas chuckled, though the movement made him wince. "You're refreshingly honest, Miss King," she supplied. "Vanessa King." "Vanessa," he repeated, as though testing how her name felt on his tongue. "I owe you a debt I can't repay." By the time Vanessa left the hospital, the sun was rising, casting a hazy glow over the city skyline. Vanessa smiled faintly, but her thoughts remained on Lucas Sterling, the man whose life she'd saved, and who, unknowingly, had already begun to change hers. As Vanessa drifted off to sleep, across town in a pristine private hospital suite, Lucas Sterling stared out the window, the weight of his own mortality settling heavily on his shoulders. For years, he'd built walls around himself, hiding from the pain of his infertility and the loneliness it brought. But now, a woman from an entirely different world had saved his life, shaking the foundations of his carefully curated isolation. "Vanessa King," he murmured, her name lingering in the quiet room. For the first time in years, Lucas felt a spark of something he couldn't quite name, a sense that perhaps his life wasn't as empty as it seemed. Unbeknownst to either of them, their worlds were about to collide in ways neither could predict. Lucas Sterling's head throbbed as he leaned back against the cool hospital pillows. Despite the lingering pain in his ribs, his mind was sharper than it had been in days. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman who'd pulled him from the wreckage, Vanessa King, a paramedic who had every reason to treat him as just another patient. Yet she'd saved his life with a determination that lingered in his memory. The sound of the door creaking open pulled him from his thoughts. His personal assistant, Grace, stepped in, her expression a mixture of relief and worry. "Mr. Sterling, how are you feeling?" she asked, holding a tablet tightly against her chest. "I've been better," he replied, his voice rough. "What's the damage?" Grace glanced at the tablet before responding. "The media caught wind of your accident. There's speculation about why you were driving alone at such an odd hour." Lucas waved his hand dismissively. "Let them speculate. There's more important business to attend to." He paused, his brows furrowing. "Have you found her?" Grace blinked in confusion. "Found who, sir?" "The paramedic who saved me." "Vanessa King," Lucas said, his tone insistent. Grace hesitated. "I could look into it, but why? She was just doing her job, wasn't she?" Lucas's gaze hardened. "She wasn't just doing her job. She saved my life, Grace. I need to thank her properly." Grace nodded, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to argue. "I'll make some calls." Across the city, Vanessa was busy cleaning up after breakfast. Her son Jaden sat at the table, scribbling in his sketchbook while her mother washed the dishes. The television hummed softly in the background, playing the morning news. Vanessa barely noticed the anchor's words until her name caught her attention. The paramedic credited with saving billionaire Lucas Sterling's life following a devastating car accident late last night. Her hands froze mid-motion, the dish rag slipping into the sink. She turned to the screen, where grainy footage of the crash site played, followed by a still photo of her in uniform. Her stomach dropped. "Mom, is that you?" Jaden asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. Vanessa grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. "Yeah, it's me. But it's no big deal, okay? Just another day at work." Her mother gave her a skeptical look. "That didn't sound like just another day. You saved a billionaire?" Vanessa shrugged, avoiding her mom's probing eyes. "So what? Everyone deserves to be saved, rich or poor." Before her mother could press further, there was a knock at the door. Vanessa frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she reached his room, Lucas looked up from the book he was reading. His face lit up with genuine relief. "Vanessa," he said, setting the book aside. "You came." She folded her arms across her chest. "You didn't really give me a choice." Lucas chuckled, though the motion made him wince. "Fair enough. But still, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to thank you properly." "You already thanked me," Vanessa replied, her tone flat. "Twice now, if you count sending your assistant to my door." Lucas tilted his head, studying her. "You're not used to people showing gratitude, are you?" Vanessa bristled. "I'm not used to people chasing me down to do it. You're making a big deal out of something that isn't." "It is a big deal," Lucas countered, his voice firm. "You saved my life. That's not something I take lightly." Vanessa softened slightly, but she kept her guard up. "I've saved a lot of lives. I don't get visits from their assistants." "You're right," Lucas admitted. "But this is different. You didn't just save anyone. You saved me, and I don't want to pretend that doesn't matter." Vanessa didn't know how to respond to that. She shifted awkwardly, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. Lucas broke the silence first. "I don't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted you to know how much I appreciate what you did." He hesitated, then added, "And if there's anything I can do for you, anything at all, you only have to ask." Vanessa shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. Just get better and try not to crash any more fancy cars, okay?" Lucas chuckled again, the sound lighter this time. "I'll do my best." As Vanessa turned to leave, Lucas called after her. "Wait, can I at least take you and your family to dinner once I'm out of here? A thank you meal, nothing more." Vanessa didn't think much about Lucas Sterling over the next few days. Her shifts were long, and her life was full enough with Jaden, her 8-year-old son, and her mother's constant reminders that she needed to take better care of herself. But Lucas hadn't forgotten her. It started subtly, flowers delivered to her doorstep with a simple note, "Thank you for saving my life, Lucas." Then came a phone call from his assistant, Grace, asking if Vanessa had any preferences for the dinner they'd agreed upon. She'd almost forgotten she'd agreed at all. Now, as Vanessa stood outside one of the city's fanciest restaurants, Jaden tugging at her hand, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. Her well-worn blouse and slacks felt painfully out of place against the backdrop of designer suits and cocktail dresses. "Mom, are we really eating here?" Jaden asked, his eyes wide as he craned his neck to look at the towering building. Vanessa knelt beside him, straightening his tie. "Just for tonight, okay? Then it's back to grilled cheese and tomato soup." The revolving door spun open, and Lucas appeared, walking toward them with an easy, confident stride. He wasn't in a suit this time, just dark jeans and a button-down shirt, but he still exuded the kind of wealth that couldn't be hidden. "Vanessa." "Jaden," he greeted warmly. "I'm glad you could make it." Jaden stared at him, starstruck. "Are you the rich guy Mom saved?" Lucas laughed, crouching to Jaden's level. "I guess I am. But tonight, I'm just Lucas. Deal?" Jaden grinned, nodding. Vanessa rolled her eyes, but couldn't help smiling at the interaction. Inside, the restaurant was even more extravagant than Vanessa had imagined. Chandeliers sparkled above tables, set with crystal glasses and pristine white linens. Lucas led them to a private room at the back, where a table was already set for 3. "This is too much," Vanessa said as she took her seat. "You didn't have to go all out." Lucas waved off her protest. "It's just dinner." Just dinner turned out to be a 5-course meal with dishes Vanessa couldn't pronounce. Jaden was wide-eyed as he tried his first bite of lobster bisque, while Vanessa hesitated, wondering how much this evening was costing Lucas. "I meant what I said," Lucas began after the main course had been served. "If there's anything you or your family need, I want to help." Vanessa shook her head. "We're fine, Lucas." "Really?" He frowned slightly. "I don't mean to overstep, but I see how hard you're working. You shouldn't have to carry all of this on your own." Vanessa stiffened. "I don't need a handout." Lucas raised his hands in surrender. "I'm not offering one. I just want to repay the kindness you showed me. You saved my life, Vanessa. That's not something I take lightly." Her defenses wavered under the sincerity in his voice. Before she could respond, Jaden broke the tension. "Mom says she doesn't trust rich people," he blurted, earning a mortified look from Vanessa. "Jaden," she hissed, but Lucas only laughed. "Smart kid," he said with a grin. "Your mom's not wrong. A lot of rich people can't be trusted, but I'd like to think I'm one of the good ones." Jaden studied him for a moment, then nodded, seemingly satisfied. Vanessa let out a small sigh of relief and decided to change the subject. "So, what were you doing driving alone the night of the accident?" she asked, folding her arms. "Don't tell me you were sneaking out for fast food or something." Lucas's smile faltered slightly, and he looked down at his plate. "I had a lot on my mind. I needed to clear my head." Vanessa tilted her head. "That's not an answer." He hesitated, then sighed. "I just come from a meeting with my board of directors. Things didn't go well. I have this one guy, Martin Gray, who's been pushing back on every decision I make. That night, I was trying to figure out how to deal with him." Vanessa caught the subtle bitterness in his tone. "Corporate drama?" "Something like that," Lucas said, his expression darkening briefly. But then he shook it off and smiled. "Anyway, enough about me. What about you? Tell me about your work." Vanessa hesitated, unsure why he cared. But as the evening wore on, she found herself opening up. She told him about the long hours, the emotional toll, and the moments that made it all worth it, like delivering a baby in the back of the ambulance or comforting a scared child after an accident. Lucas listened intently, his gaze never wavering. By the end of the meal, Vanessa realized she'd talked more than she had in months. The next morning, Vanessa found herself thinking about Lucas as she made breakfast. He was different than she'd expected, not just a rich man trying to ease his guilt with flashy gestures, but someone who seemed genuinely interested in her life. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up outside. She peeked through the window and froze. Inside was a brand new set of art supplies, pencils, paints, sketchbooks, all the things Jaden loved but that Vanessa rarely had the budget for. "Lucas," she began, unsure whether to be grateful or annoyed. "Before you say no, just think of it as a gift for him, not for you," he said with a wink. Vanessa sighed, torn between exasperation and gratitude. "You're impossible." "Maybe," Lucas said with a grin, "but I'm also persistent." As he walked back to his car, Vanessa watched him go, her emotions swirling. She didn't know what to make of Lucas Sterling, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going away anytime soon. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Vanessa. Between her grueling shifts, raising Jaden, and Lucas's unexpected but persistent presence in her life, she barely had a moment to breathe. At first, she'd resisted his attempts to get closer, but Lucas had a way of breaking through her defenses with small acts of kindness and quiet determination. "But don't get too used to Mr. Lucas spoiling you, okay?" Jaden grinned mischievously. "He says you're too stubborn to let him spoil you, so he has to go through me." Vanessa rolled her eyes, but she couldn't suppress a small smile. Lucas was impossible. The next time Vanessa saw Lucas, it was at a school fundraiser Jaden's elementary school was hosting. She hadn't expected him to show up when she casually mentioned it during one of their conversations, but there he was, standing out like a sore thumb in his tailored jacket and polished shoes. "Lucas, what are you doing here?" People whispered behind their hands, stealing curious glances at the billionaire who had somehow wandered into their modest neighborhood. "Look, I appreciate the effort, but you don't belong here," she said, her voice low. "People are staring." "Let them stare," Lucas replied, unbothered. "I'm not here for them. I'm here for you." "And Jaden?" Vanessa sighed, rubbing her temple. "You don't have to keep proving yourself, Lucas. I already get it. You're a nice guy." "It's not about proving anything," Lucas said, his expression softening. "I just want to be part of your world, even if only for a little while." His words caught her off guard, leaving her unsure how to respond. "Mom says we can't afford one right now, but maybe we'll win." Vanessa flushed, feeling embarrassed. "Jaden, that's enough." But Lucas crouched down to Jaden's level, smiling. "How about we try our luck together?" Vanessa watched as Lucas and Jaden walked off to the raffle table, her heart tugging in ways she hadn't expected. She'd spent so long keeping people at arm's length, but Lucas had a way of slipping through the cracks, one act of kindness at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Lucas's presence in Vanessa's life became a steady rhythm. He showed up when she least expected it, whether it was surprising Jaden with tickets to a local art exhibit or simply dropping by with dinner after one of her long shifts. At first, Vanessa tried to keep her walls up, but Lucas's persistence and his genuine affection for Jaden made it harder and harder to push him away. One evening, after Jaden had gone to bed, Lucas and Vanessa found themselves sitting together on the small balcony of her apartment. The city lights glittered in the distance, and a soft breeze carried the sounds of distant traffic. "You've been awfully quiet tonight," Lucas said, breaking the silence. Vanessa leaned against the railing, her arms crossed. Lucas's expression softened, and he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Vanessa, I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want something from me. Investors, board members, even my so-called friends. But you're the first person who's ever treated me like a person, not a bank account." She looked away, unsure how to respond. "You saved my life," Lucas continued. "But more than that, you've shown me what real strength looks like. The way you fight for your son, the way you give everything to your job, it's inspiring. And it's made me realize how empty my own life has been." Vanessa swallowed hard, his words cutting through her usual defenses. "Lucas, I'm not some charity project." "I know," he said softly, "and that's not what this is. I like being here. With you. With Jaden." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of his words hung in the air, heavy but not unwelcome. Finally, Vanessa sighed, her shoulders relaxing. "You're impossible, you know that?" Lucas smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "I've been told." Despite her best efforts to keep things casual, Vanessa couldn't ignore the growing connection between her and Lucas. He was slowly becoming a fixture in her life, and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. "Mom," he said, his voice small, "do you think Mr. Lucas will stay around for a while?" Vanessa froze, her heart clenching. "Why do you ask that, baby?" "Because I like him," Jaden murmured, already drifting off. "He makes you smile." Vanessa sat beside him, brushing a hand through his curls. "We'll see, sweetheart," she whispered. "We'll see." As she closed his door and leaned against the wall, Vanessa felt the weight of Jaden's words settle over her. Lucas Sterling wasn't just changing her life. He was becoming part of it. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if that scared her or thrilled her. The sun had barely risen when Vanessa's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She reached for it with one hand while flipping pancakes with the other. The sight of Lucas's name on the screen made her stomach flip, a reaction she still wasn't used to. "Morning," she answered, trying to keep her tone casual. Her mother gave her a knowing look but didn't press. "Of course, honey. Be careful." Vanessa arrived at St. Mary's to find Lucas sitting in a private room, a bandage wrapped around his forehead and his arm in a sling. His normally pristine appearance was disheveled, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked vulnerable. "What happened?" she demanded, walking in. Lucas looked up, his expression softening at the sight of her. "It's not as bad as it looks." "Lucas, you're in a hospital. I think that qualifies as bad." He sighed, running his free hand through his hair. "Someone attacked me outside my office last night." Vanessa's heart dropped. "Attacked? By who?" "I don't know," Lucas admitted, his jaw tightening. "The police think it might have been a mugging, but I don't buy it. Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing." Vanessa sank into the chair beside his bed, her mind spinning. "Why didn't you call me last night?" "I could have." "Done what?" She barely knew Lucas, let alone anything about his family history. When the doctor left, an uneasy silence filled the room. "That's weird, right?" Vanessa finally said, her voice shaky. Lucas nodded slowly. "Very. But it's not something we need to worry about now." Vanessa wasn't so sure. Something about the revelation left her feeling unsettled, as if there were pieces of a puzzle she hadn't yet seen. Later that day, Lucas insisted on taking Vanessa out for coffee as a thank you for rushing to his side. She agreed, though her mind was still preoccupied with the attack and the strange conversation with the doctor. They sat at a quiet cafe near the hospital, the hum of conversation around them providing a soothing backdrop. "Do you think the attack was random?" Vanessa asked, breaking the silence. Lucas stirred his coffee absently. "No, I think it has something to do with Martin." "Martin?" Vanessa frowned. She vaguely remembered him mentioning the name once before. "Your business rival?" "More like a thorn in my side," Lucas said with a bitter smile. "He's been gunning for my position at the company for years. I wouldn't put it past him to resort to something like this." Vanessa's stomach turned. That night, Vanessa lay awake in bed, her thoughts a tangled web of worry and confusion. Lucas's world was far more dangerous than she'd realized. But it wasn't just the attack or Martin that troubled her. It was the strange connection she and Lucas seemed to share. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Genetic compatibility. Shared ancestry. For now, all Lucas could do was wait, and hope that whatever brought Vanessa into his life would be enough to keep her there. The city skyline blurred in Vanessa's peripheral vision as she stared out the bus window. It had been a long day, the kind that left her both physically drained and mentally tangled. Between Lucas's attack, the strange revelation from the doctor, and the constant juggle of work and motherhood, her mind felt like it was running in circles. It's been a stressful week, but as the days passed, the symptoms only grew worse. Nausea turned into bouts of dizziness, and her usual boundless energy dwindled to a sluggish crawl. It wasn't until her mother gave her a long, suspicious look one morning that Vanessa started to worry. "When was the last time you went to the doctor?" "I have your results and, well, I'm not sure how to explain this." Vanessa's heart sank. "What's wrong?" The doctor hesitated before meeting her gaze. "You're pregnant." The words hit her like a freight train. She stared at the doctor, unable to speak. "That's impossible," she finally managed, her voice shaking. The bus ride home was a blur. Vanessa gripped the edge of her seat, staring blankly at the floor as the city sped past her. The doctor's words echoed in her mind, over and over. "You're pregnant, twins." Her phone buzzed in her pocket, snapping her out of her daze. She pulled it out and saw Lucas's name on the screen. For a moment, she considered ignoring it, but then she remembered the doctor's strange comments about their genetic connection. She answered hesitantly. "Lucas?" "Vanessa," he said, his voice immediately calming her frayed nerves. "I was just checking in. Are you okay?" She hesitated, unsure how to respond. I'm not sure." "What's wrong?" Lucas asked, his tone laced with concern. Vanessa closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "I need to talk to you. In person." Later that evening, Lucas arrived at Vanessa's apartment, looking as polished as ever despite the sling still supporting his injured arm. He glanced around the cozy space, his eyes landing on the drawings taped to the walls before returning to Vanessa. "You sounded serious on the phone," he said, taking a seat on the couch. "What's going on?" Vanessa sat across from him, wringing her hands. "I went to the doctor today," she began slowly. Lucas's expression shifted immediately. "Are you okay? Is it something serious?" She shook her head. "Not exactly. Lucas, I'm pregnant." His eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing as if he were trying to find the right words. "Pregnant?" "Yes," Vanessa said, her voice trembling, "and the doctor says it's twins." For a moment, the room was silent. Then Lucas leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "How? Is there?" "I don't know." Vanessa interrupted, her frustration spilling out. "This doesn't make any sense, Lucas. I haven't been with anyone. The only explanation I can think of is the blood transfusion, the genetic compatibility." Lucas stared at her, his mind clearly racing. "That's scientifically improbable, isn't it?" "Improbable, yes," Vanessa snapped, "but apparently not impossible." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his usual composure slipping. "Vanessa, I don't even know how to process this. Twins? You're sure they're mine?" "They have to be," she said, her voice softening. "There's no other explanation." Lucas leaned back, his gaze distant. "I was told I could never have children. The doctors said it wasn't possible after everything." Vanessa's heart ached at the vulnerability in his voice. "I don't know how this happened, Lucas, but it did. And now we have to figure out what to do next." He looked at her, his blue eyes searching hers. But as they sat together in the quiet of her living room, one thought loomed large in both their minds. This was only the beginning. The next few days passed in a haze for Vanessa. Every time she looked at Jaden, she thought about the twins growing inside her and the complicated, improbable situation she found herself in. Lucas, true to his word, remained a steady presence, checking in on her often and insisting they face the situation together. "Vanessa, you've been quiet all day. What's going on?" Vanessa hesitated, unsure how to begin, but there was no use hiding the truth anymore. "Mom," she said, her voice trembling, "I'm pregnant." Her mother's eyes widened. "Pregnant? How?" "That's not even the strangest part," Vanessa interrupted, cutting off her mother's disbelief. "It's twins." Vanessa nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. While Vanessa was grappling with her emotions, Lucas was dealing with his own challenges. He sat in his office late one night, the city lights casting long shadows across the room. A folder sat on his desk, its contents spilling out: financial reports, company memos, and the unmistakable traces of sabotage. Martin Gray. Lucas clenched his fists, anger simmering just beneath the surface. Martin's attempts to undermine him had become more brazen, and Lucas was certain the attack outside his office hadn't been random. But proving it would be another matter entirely. As Lucas stared at the damning evidence, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was Grace. "Lucas, we've got a problem," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "What now?" Lucas asked, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Martin's people leaked a story to the press," Grace said. "They're claiming Vanessa's pregnancy is a calculated move to extort you." Lucas froze, his chest tightening. "What?" It's all over the tabloids, Grace continued. They're painting her as a gold digger and questioning the timing of her pregnancy. It's ugly, Lucas. Lucas's jaw tightened. I'll handle it. The next morning, Vanessa's world shattered when she stepped out of her apartment to find reporters swarming the sidewalk. Cameras flashed, and questions were hurled at her like stones. Ms. King, is it true you're having Lucas Sterling's twins to secure his fortune? How long have you been planning this? Are you concerned about the backlash? Vanessa froze, her mind racing. Jaden clung to her side, his wide eyes filled with fear. Leave us alone, Vanessa shouted, shielding her son as she pushed her way through the crowd. The questions continued, their cruelty cutting deep, until she finally made it to her car and slammed the door shut. Her hands shook as she gripped the steering wheel, Jaden's quiet sobs breaking her heart. Mom, why are they saying those things about you? He asked. Vanessa took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Because they don't know the truth, baby. But we do. That's all that matters. Vanessa stormed into Lucas's penthouse later that day, her anger barely contained. He was waiting for her, his expression tense. What the hell is going on? She demanded, tossing a tabloid onto the coffee table. The headline blared, Billionaire's Baby Scandal. Who is Vanessa King? Lucas sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's Martin. He's trying to discredit me by dragging you into this. And you didn't think to warn me? Vanessa snapped. I had reporters outside my apartment this morning. Jaden was terrified. I didn't know he'd go this far, Lucas said, his voice heavy with regret. But I'm not letting him get away with it. Vanessa folded her arms, her anger giving way to exhaustion. This is too much, Lucas. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, Lucas said softly, stepping closer. And I'm sorry. But we're in this together now, Vanessa. I won't let him hurt you or Jaden. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of everything felt suffocating. Later that evening, Vanessa sat in Lucas's living room while he worked on damage control. His PR team was already drafting statements, and private security had been hired to keep the press away from her apartment. As the chaos unfolded around her, Vanessa couldn't help but feel like she was losing herself in Lucas's world. Everything was spiraling out of control, and she had no idea how to stop it. Lucas joined her on the couch, his expression apologetic. I know this isn't what you signed up for. Vanessa looked at him, her eyes weary. You think? Lucas reached for her hand, his touch warm and steady. We'll get through this, Vanessa. I promise. For the first time that day, Vanessa felt a small flicker of hope. But deep down, she knew the road ahead would only get harder. The next morning, a new twist emerged. While reviewing his grandfather's old files, Lucas discovered something shocking. His family had a history of hidden interracial relationships. In the 1960s, his grandfather had a relationship with a black woman that ended in scandal, leading to her being disowned and her child's existence erased from the family records. Lucas stared at the documents, his mind racing. Could this explain the genetic connection between him and Vanessa? Was it possible they shared some distant ancestry? And if so, what would it mean for their future? He knew he needed to tell Vanessa, but the revelation only added another layer of complexity to their already tangled lives. As he closed the file, Lucas made a silent vow. Whatever happened, he would protect Vanessa and their children, no matter what it took. The scandal had spread like wildfire, and the fallout was worse than either Vanessa or Lucas had anticipated. Paparazzi hounded Vanessa's every move. Her workplace was overwhelmed with calls from reporters, and even her neighbors began whispering behind her back. The weight of it all was unbearable, but Vanessa wasn't about to crumble. I won't let him destroy my life, Vanessa said, her voice firm as she stood in Lucas's office. Lucas nodded, leaning against his desk. Neither will I. Martin thinks he can get away with this, but he's underestimated us. Vanessa crossed her arms, her gaze unyielding. Then let's show him he's wrong. The next day, Lucas and Vanessa made their first move. Together, they called a press conference to set the record straight. Vanessa was reluctant to step into the spotlight, but Lucas assured her it was the best way to reclaim the narrative. Are you ready for this? Lucas asked as they stood behind the curtain at the event venue. No, Vanessa admitted, smoothing the front of her blouse. But I'm doing it anyway. Lucas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You've got this. When they stepped out onto the stage, the room erupted in a flurry of camera flashes and murmurs. The evidence was damning, but Lucas wanted more. Get me everything you can on Martin, Lucas instructed Grace late one night. I don't just want to expose him. I want to make sure he never has the chance to pull something like this again. Grace nodded, her expression grim. Understood. As the days passed, the tide began to turn. Vanessa hugged him tightly, her heart aching. It's complicated, sweetheart, but I promise you, everything's going to be okay. Jaden nodded, but his quiet sadness lingered, fueling Vanessa's determination to protect him from the chaos. A breakthrough came a week later when Grace uncovered evidence of Martin's involvement in the attack on Lucas. A series of emails revealed that Martin had hired private investigators to follow Lucas and gather information to use against him. The attack appeared to be part of a larger plan to discredit Lucas and force him out of the company. Lucas stared at the emails, his jaw tightening. This is it. We've got him. Vanessa leaned over his shoulder, reading the messages with a mix of anger and disbelief. He planned all of this, she said. He put your life in danger, Lucas. And yours, Lucas added, turning to face her. I'm not letting him get away with this. The final confrontation came during a heated board meeting. Oh, but I can, Lucas replied, his voice cold. And I will. By the time I'm done, you won't just lose your position here. You'll be facing criminal charges. Martin's face paled, and for the first time, Vanessa saw fear in his eyes. The board quickly voted to remove Martin from his position, and Lucas wasted no time in forwarding the evidence to law enforcement. As Martin was escorted out of the building, Vanessa felt a wave of relief wash over her. It's over, she said softly. Not yet, Lucas replied, but we're getting there. That evening, Lucas and Vanessa celebrated their victory with a quiet dinner at her apartment. Jaden was fast asleep in his room, and for the first time in weeks, the tension between them had eased. I couldn't have done this without you, Lucas said, his gaze steady as he raised his glass. Thank you. The morning air was crisp, the city's hum quieter than usual as Vanessa stood in front of Lucas's towering office building. Despite their recent victory against Martin, she felt uneasy. Something didn't sit right, and it wasn't just the lingering stress from the scandal or the media frenzy that still hovered over her life. The timing is too perfect. He knew this would destabilize you. Lucas clenched his fists, his mind flashing to Vanessa. She'd been through enough already, and now Martin was dragging her name through the mud yet again. At Vanessa's apartment, she was scrolling through her phone when the first article popped up. The headline read, Vanessa King, a scandal bigger than Lucas Sterling? Her hands trembled as she read the accusations: embezzlement, using her children's charity work to cover fraudulent activities, and leveraging Lucas's name to escape scrutiny. Mom, what's wrong? Jaden asked, standing in the doorway. Vanessa quickly locked her phone, forcing a smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Just work stuff. But the knot in her stomach told her this was far worse than anything she'd faced before. Moments later, her phone buzzed. It was Lucas. Vanessa, I need you to come to my office, he said, his voice urgent. What's going on? She asked, though she already had a sinking feeling. It's Martin. He left one last mess for us to clean up. When Vanessa arrived at Lucas's office, Grace was waiting with a grim expression. It's bad, Grace said as she led Vanessa into the conference room. The table was littered with papers, screenshots, and notes. He fabricated everything: emails, receipts, even a fake witness statement. Vanessa scanned the documents, her face pale. People are going to believe this, aren't they? Lucas stepped forward, his expression firm. Not if we expose the truth first. Grace and I are already working on dismantling his narrative. Vanessa shook her head, tears threatening to spill. This isn't just about me, Lucas. It's about Jaden. What if this ruins his life too? Lucas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I won't let that happen. You have my word. Vanessa took a deep breath, steadying herself. What's the plan? Over the next 24 hours, Lucas and his team worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Martin. Grace tracked down the sources of the forged documents, uncovering a trail that led directly back to Martin's associates. Vanessa provided character witnesses and records from her work at the paramedic unit to disprove the fraudulent claims. The media storm intensified, but Lucas held a press conference, standing beside Vanessa as he delivered a powerful statement. These baseless accusations against Vanessa King are yet another attempt by a desperate man to deflect blame, Lucas said, his voice steady. We have undeniable evidence that these documents were fabricated by Martin Gray and his associates. Legal action is already underway. Vanessa stepped forward, her heart pounding. I've spent my life working hard to provide for my son and give back to my community. I won't let lies destroy everything I've built. And I won't let a bully like Martin Gray scare me into silence. The reporters erupted with questions, but Vanessa held her ground. For the first time, she felt the strength of standing in her truth. That evening, as Vanessa sat in Lucas's penthouse, exhaustion finally hit her. She leaned back on the couch, staring at the city lights outside. You were incredible today, Lucas said, handing her a cup of tea. Vanessa let out a shaky laugh. I didn't feel incredible. Trust me, Lucas said, sitting beside her. You've shown more courage than most people I know. Vanessa looked at him, her walls slowly crumbling. Lucas, why are you still here? After everything, you could have walked away. You don't owe me anything. Lucas reached for her hand, his eyes unwavering. I'm here because I want to be. Because you're worth fighting for, Vanessa. Her chest tightened as his words sank in. For so long, she'd carried everything on her own, afraid to let anyone in. But Lucas had shown her that she didn't have to face the world alone. The final blow to Martin came a week later when Lucas and Grace uncovered the smoking gun. Financial records proving that Martin had used company funds to pay for the forged documents and bribe journalists. The evidence was irrefutable. Lucas presented the findings to the board, who unanimously agreed to press charges against Martin. Within days, Martin was arrested, his once pristine reputation shattered. The victory was bittersweet for Vanessa. While she was relieved to see justice served, the ordeal had left scars she wasn't sure would ever fully heal. But as she stood beside Lucas, watching the news coverage of Martin's arrest, she felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. We did it, Lucas said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Vanessa nodded, leaning into him. Yeah, we did. That night, as they sat together in the quiet of the penthouse, Vanessa turned to Lucas with a small smile. So, what now? She asked. Lucas took her hand, his expression soft. Now, we start building the life we've been fighting for. Vanessa rested her head against his shoulder, a sense of peace settling over her. For the first time, the future didn't seem so daunting. With Lucas by her side, she knew they could face anything. The morning light streamed through Vanessa's apartment window, casting a warm glow over the cluttered kitchen table where Jaden was finishing his latest drawing. His colorful artwork now featured 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun. Himself, Vanessa, and Lucas. Is this us, kiddo? Lucas's presence had become a stabilizing force in both their lives, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Vanessa allowed herself to believe in the possibility of happiness. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling up outside. Peeking through the curtain, she saw Lucas stepping out, holding a small bouquet of flowers and a wrapped gift. Mom, he's here, Jaden exclaimed, abandoning his breakfast to run to the door. Vanessa chuckled, wiping her hands on a dish towel before following him. When she opened the door, Lucas greeted her with his usual warm smile, handing her the flowers. For you, he said, his tone soft. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What's the occasion? Lucas grinned. Do I need an occasion to make my favorite family smile? She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the blush creeping up her cheeks. Come on in. Over breakfast, Lucas shared his latest plans for his company. With Martin out of the picture, Lucas was restructuring the leadership team and allocating resources to philanthropic projects, inspired by Vanessa's work and values. I want to fund a community health program, Lucas explained, his eyes lighting up. Mobile clinics, mental health resources, and support for first responders like you. It's something that matters. Vanessa paused mid-bite, her fork hovering over her plate. Lucas, that's incredible. But why first responders? Because you showed me how much they do with so little, he said, his gaze steady. You've spent your life helping people, Vanessa. I want to do the same. She set her fork down, overwhelmed by his sincerity. Lucas, you don't have to do all of this for me. I'm not, he replied gently. I'm doing it because it's right. Later that day, Lucas took Vanessa and Jaden to a nearby park. The crisp autumn air was filled with the sound of laughter as Jaden ran ahead, chasing after a kite Lucas had bought for him. Vanessa watched from a bench, her hands cradling her growing belly. You're quiet, Lucas said, sitting beside her. I'm just taking it all in, Vanessa admitted, her eyes following Jaden's joyful movements. It feels strange to have peace after everything. Lucas reached for her hand, lacing his fingers with hers. You deserve peace, Vanessa. You deserve a life where you don't have to fight every second just to survive. Vanessa turned to him, her heart pounding. Lucas stood at her side, his own eyes misty as he gently touched the baby's hands. They're miracles, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Jaden peeked around the door, his eyes wide with wonder. Can I see them? Vanessa nodded, smiling as Jaden climbed onto the bed to get a closer look. They're so tiny, he said, his voice full of awe. What are their names? Vanessa looked at Lucas, and they shared a silent agreement. This is Lily, she said, touching her daughter's soft cheek. And this is Leo. Jaden grinned. Hi, Lily. Hi, Leo. I'm your big brother. Lucas wrapped an arm around Vanessa's shoulders, holding her close as they watched Jaden interact with his new siblings. In that moment, Vanessa knew that despite all the challenges they'd faced, their family had found its footing. In the weeks that followed, Lucas and Vanessa settled into their new roles as partners and parents. Lucas stepped back from his company to focus on his family and the community health initiative he'd launched in Vanessa's honor. Meanwhile, Vanessa took on a part-time role as an advisor for the program, using her expertise to ensure it addressed the real needs of the people it served. Their lives weren't without challenges. Raising 3 children while navigating a complicated public image was no easy feat. But they faced each hurdle together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the same park where their journey had truly begun, Lucas turned to Vanessa with a thoughtful expression. Vanessa, he began, stopping beneath the shade of a towering oak tree. I have a question for you. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a playful smile. What's that? He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Will you marry me? Vanessa's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. Lucas, she whispered, her heart pounding. I know we've taken the long road to get here, he said, his voice steady. But you're my partner, my strength, and the love of my life. I want to spend the rest of my days making you and our family as happy as you've made me. Tears filled Vanessa's eyes as she nodded. Yes, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. 1,000 times, yes. Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, and the park erupted in applause as Jaden, Lily, and Leo, helped by a few strategically placed friends, ran out holding a banner that read, Mom, say yes. Vanessa laughed through her tears, pulling Lucas into a kiss as their children cheered around them. In that moment, surrounded by love and the life they'd built together, Vanessa knew she had finally found her happy ending.